Okay, guys, so this is my first tutorial video for Math 10C. I'm just gonna post this video just to show you what my classes will look like moving forward. Okay, so I'm gonna be making this tutorial videos. Not every day, maybe 3 times a week. So we're not gonna overwhelm you. We're only gonna be giving you 3 hours of work time per week. So that will include my tutorial videos and the homework that you have to do. Um, but the reason why I'm making this video right now is just to show you what it looks like and also to receive feedback from you. Okay, so please give me feedback. I'll actually make a Google assignment where I'll give you options such as, were you satisfied with the length of the video? Was it too long? Was it too short? So those questions, please make sure you answer them because again, I'm doing all this for you, and you have to tell me whether or not it's working for you. If it's not, then we can try something different, right? The whole purpose of this is to make you feel comfortable, and I can adapt my teaching style to your needs. Okay, so this was the quiz that I gave you that I was supposed to collect on Monday, right? But the circumstances have changed. So instead of collecting this quiz, I will just show you the solutions. So this is the first question, right? Again, we have a trinomial, so that means we'll probably have to use product sum to factor this. But before we start factoring, right, the first step is to see, is there something in common in each term that I can factor, okay? Is there a GCF that I can factor? And it turns out that there isn't, okay? So how do you find the combination? Well, remember, if the coefficient of x squared is not visible, it has to be 1. Okay, so I'm looking for two numbers that multiply 2. Again, remember, a quadratic equation looks like ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm looking for two numbers that is always the product of a and c. So 1 times -8, that's -8. And they have to add up to my b coefficient, and my b coefficient over here is 2. Okay, now this takes a little bit of practicing to perfect, but if you can't really find the combination, always start with 1 and 8. So 1 and 8, one of them has to be negative, but it doesn't matter which one's negative, you will not get 2. Okay, so if 1 doesn't work, then go to 2. So 2 times 4, I know gives me 8. One of them has to be negative because this is a negative number. Now, because my sum is positive, that means my smaller number has to be negative. Okay, so that means 2 has to be negative. And as you can see, -2 plus 4 gives you +2. Now, because the coefficient is 1, guys, right, you can use the shortcut. So how does the shortcut work? You put the variable, in this case it's x, and then you look at the first number in your combination. So that's -2, close the bracket, then you put x again, and then you look at the second number, which is +4, and that is your answer, okay? So you can use the shortcut over here, or you could rewrite this 2x in an intelligent way using the combination. So -2x plus 4x, right? So -2x plus 4x will work, but it's just a little bit more time consuming, okay? And I'll show how that works in the second question, because as you can see in the second question, my coefficient is not, the coefficient of x squared is not 1, so we cannot use the shortcut over here, okay? So in a similar fashion, because it's a trinomial, I know that I'll have to use product sum, but let's just see if there's something that we can factor. And it turns out that there isn't, right? Because there isn't a number that divides 10, 11, and 3 besides 1. So factoring 1 doesn't really help you at all. Um, so there's nothing to factor. So that means we can just proceed with product sum. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 10, right, times 3, which is 30, and they have to add up to the b coefficient, right? So the coefficient of x, which is -11, okay? So let me just erase this because it looks somewhat messy. So how do you find the combination? This one's kind of tricky. Again, just try it. Start with 1. 1 and 30 will not work. One of them obviously, um, well, okay, so because 30 is positive, either both of them have to be negative or both of them have to be positive. That's right. So for you to get 30, either both numbers have to be positive or both of them have to be negative. But because your sum is negative, right, that means both numbers have to be negative. Okay, so 1, so -1 and -30 will not work. Then you try -2 and -15. That wouldn't work either. -3 and -10 doesn't give you -11, -13. That's close. 4 doesn't divide 30. 5 does. So let's try -5 and 6. And I think that would work. Okay, so that's one way of figuring out the combination. Start from 1, then try 2, and then try 3. And increase your number by 1 all the time, and then eventually you'll find a combination that works. Okay, so -5 minus 6 is -11. So this satisfies both conditions. So now how do you proceed? Well, all you have to do is rewrite 11x in an intelligent way. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite the 10x squared the way I see it. And then look at the first combination number. So that's -5. So I'm going to put -5x and then -6x plus 3. Okay. So again, -5x minus 6x still gives me -11x. So I haven't changed anything. Now the advantage of writing this -5 and -6 is now you have 4 terms. When you have 4 terms, guys, you can use grouping, okay? So let's do that. So how does grouping work? We have to focus on the first 2 terms, okay? So we have to find the GCF of the first 2 terms. So the biggest number that divides 5 and 10 is 5. And then you have x, both of them have x in common, right? So this is an x squared, this is an x. So you have to pick the lowest exponent. The lowest exponent over here is 1, right? If you don't see it, then it's 1. So I'm going to factor x. And now you have to ask yourself this question. What do I need to multiply 5x by to get 10x squared? Well, 5 times 2 will give me 10, and x times x will give me x squared, right? And then you have to ask yourself, what do I need to multiply 5x by to get -5x? Well, that's just -1, right? Once you have this inside your bracket, for this to work, you should get the same thing um, over here, okay, with these 2 terms, okay? So let's target these 2 terms. You should get the same thing. Otherwise, you've done something incorrectly, okay? So what do you need to multiply 2x by to get -6x? And the answer is -3. And now let's check. Does -3 times -1 give me +3? Yes, it does. So that means you have done this correctly, okay? Now, once you get to this stage, you have one more thing to do, okay? Now you have to factor something. So what do you see in common over here? What is repeating itself, right? And if you look at this very closely, you'll see that there's a 2x minus 1 over here, and there's a 2x minus 1 over there. So you can actually factor the 2x minus 1. So let's do that. So if I factor 2x minus 1, that leaves me with 5x, right? So let's put the 5x over here and the -3, okay? So that's what you're left with. And this is your final answer. So let me just remove this. So yeah, whenever you see 3 terms, guys, right? So for example, this question and that question, automatically you'll have to rely on product sum, okay? Here you could have used the shortcut because the coefficient was 1, right? The coefficient over here is 1. So you could use a shortcut. But for the second question, you were not able to use the shortcut for this question because your coefficient is not 1, it's 10. So you would have to find the combination and then rewrite this middle term in an intelligent way and then rely on grouping, okay? So let me remove all that extra arrows. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. Again, guys, I have 3 terms. So that means that I could use product sum. But as you can see, 49 times 25, right? 49 times 25, that's a big number. So it might not be a wise decision to go with product sum over here. So when you have a trinomial, if product sum gives you a big number, then maybe you have to factor something, or maybe you have to use a different technique. So the other technique that can help you is called the perfect square trinomial method, right? So there's nothing to factor over here, so we'll have to rely on the perfect square trinomial method. So how does that work? Well, you look at your first term, and then you take the square root of that. So square root of 49x squared is just 7x. Now, because my middle term is negative, I'm going to have to put a minus sign, and then you take the square root of your last term. So the square root of 25 is 5, and then you square this, okay? And then once you get this, you have to check if it works. So you have to multiply 7x by negative 5, so that's negative 35x. And is negative 35x times 2 negative 70x? Yes, it is. Okay, if you get that um, same middle term, then that means that what you've done is correct. Now, if you don't get the same middle term, then that means that this is incorrect. Then you don't really have a choice but to use product sum. Okay, but obviously you're not going to get a question as difficult as that one. So now let's proceed to the next question, this one. So whenever you have 2 terms, guys, and it's separated with a minus sign, automatically you should know that you have to apply the difference of squares technique. Now, the problem over here is that neither 50 nor 18 is a nice square number, right? So when something like that happens, then you'll have to find the GCF. So what's the biggest number that divides 50 and 18? Well, it turns out to be 2. So now let's factor 2. So this becomes 25 x exponent 4 y squared minus 9. Okay, so by factoring this 2, I was able to change this um, into nice square numbers. 25x to the 4y squared, that's a nice square number. 9 is also a nice square number. Okay, so now let's apply the difference of squares. So this is just equal to, so let's just keep the 2 on the side, right? Now all you have to do is take the square root of the first term, okay? By the first term, I mean the term that's on the left-hand side of your minus sign. So the whole thing. So the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of x to the 4, remember square root of your exponent chops it in half, right? So it's just x squared. And the square root of y squared is just y. Then you put a plus sign and take the square root of whatever's on the right hand side of this minus sign. Okay, so whatever's on the right hand side. So the square root of 9 is 3. And then once you do that, you have to rewrite the same thing with a minus sign in between. So 5x squared y minus 3. And that is your final answer, guys. Okay. Finally, one more question. So over here, right, because I have 4 terms, automatically this tells me that I have to do grouping. Okay. As soon as you see 4 terms, it has to be grouping. Please don't simplify the middle term. Okay. Don't simplify this 18 minus 2x 16x, because if you do that, then you'll have to do product sum just to get this combination again. So you will just be wasting your time. So as soon as you see four terms, automatically you should know that this is grouping. So let's focus on the first two terms. So what is my GCF over here? Biggest number that divides 12 and 8 is 6. And x is repeating itself, so I'm going to factor x as well. Now, what do I need to multiply 6x by to get 12x squared? 6 times 2 will give me 12, and x times x will give me x squared. Now, what do I need to multiply 6x by again to get 18x plus 3? Okay, so once you get this, for this to work, you should get the same thing on the right. So let's just copy that and ask ourselves, what do I need to multiply 2x by to get negative 2x? That's just minus 1. And then check, does minus 1 times 3 give me minus 3? Yes, it does, okay? So that means I have done my work correctly. And now the final step is to look at, again, the whole thing and see what do you see in common in here. Okay, what is repeating itself? What is it that I can factor? And it turns out to be 2x plus 3. Okay, so if I factor 2x plus 3, then I am left with 6x and minus 1. Okay, so maybe let me use a different color. So then I'm left with 6x minus 1. So then you have to open the bracket and put 6x minus 1. Okay, and this is your final answer because, again, there's um, nothing to factor in here, right? 2 and 3, the biggest number that divides 2 and 3 is just 1. And same thing with 6 and negative 1. So this is your final answer. Now, for those of you who would like to practice a little bit more, what you could do is, in the meantime, just come up with your own questions, right? Just come up with two random binomials, let's say 2x plus 1, and then 3x minus 3. Okay, so these are my two binomials. And then multiply the binomials together, right? So you have to take the first term on the left binomial, multiply that by the whole thing on the right. Okay, so let's do that. So 2x multiplied by 3x minus 3, oops, minus 3. And then you take the second term, right, and then multiply that by the whole thing. So this will just become plus 1 times 3x minus 3, okay? And then distribute now, okay? When you distribute, you will get 6x squared, right? 3 times 2 is 6, and then 3 times 2 is negative 6x plus 3x minus 3. And then you can simplify your like terms. So this just becomes 6x squared minus 3x minus 3. Okay. And then just work backwards, right? So you know that this is your answer. Um, because you have a trinomial, right? Go with the product sum method and see if you get the same thing at the end, okay? Maybe one thing that I should point out is this can actually be simplified a step further because the 3 and the 3, you can actually pull that out, right? So um, I guess it's not the best question that I created because if you factor this completely, it's actually 2x plus 1 because there's nothing to factor over here. But in here, you can factor the 3. So this becomes 3 times x minus 1, okay? So which is why when you would solve this question, I know that you could do this by product sum, but before proceeding, there's actually a GCF that you can factor, right? Which is 3. The biggest number that divides 6, negative 3, and 3 is 3. So hopefully this example did not confuse you too much. Um, But yeah, just let me know how you find the tutorial video, if the sound is good, if the pacing is great, and if I start teaching you guys this way, will you be able to follow along? So I will make videos like these. You know, maybe I'll post 3, 4 videos a week. Um, and then I will also be available on Google Meet, which is kind of like um, a conference where you can join in. I'll send you the link on Google Classrooms. It's kind of like a conference where you can join in and ask me more questions if anything did not make sense. Now, when I make my video, like I know that's a little bit longer, but it's intentional because I want to kind of like explain every single step so that you don't have questions for me, right? For the students who, um, you know, for the students who find it a little bit more challenging to follow along, I really like to break things down for you, right? So which might make my video a little longer than it should be. But that's just me helping you so that you don't have a lot of questions. But if you still do, then by all means, please come and ask me those questions on Google Meet. I will be sending more information about this maybe sometime later today or tomorrow, okay? Okay, guys, thank you so much.